Welcome back, attractive and well-educated watchers, to a special Could They Survive 40k sequel video. We know, it's happening. Though, in all fairness, it's less of a sequel video and more of like a questions and answers video for some hypotheticals put in our comments section by a particularly cool questioning fan. Recently, we got a big long comment on our Saiyans video with some excellent questions on it that we're going to humor here in this particular installment as a way to get back on our feet with this channel and keep it with, something. You have no idea how much we appreciate the feeling of coming by every couple of days and seeing that there are always new comments pouring in at all times, most of which are extremely positive. We've been told by those in our life that when we're doing this stuff, we seem really, really happy. And if it weren't for those damnable life expenses, we'd be dedicating a lot more time to this. Hint, hint. Go to Patreon and pledge even just $1 a month to help support our work and get a vote in what videos we make. Huge thanks to everyone who has been tuning into our channel, waiting with bated breath for the next video of anything. Saiyans vs 40k is one of our most popular videos with over 1,000 views, 78 likes and only 1 dislike, over 80 comments, and some of the most actively contemplative folks we've ever had the pleasure of interacting with. It isn't as popular as Go Old, but it's definitely the second most popular video on this super tiny channel, given its small amount of time that it's been on here compared to other major projects we've been on. And we think it's more than reasonable to do a response video to this commenter to tie up some loose ends. We want to make it abundantly clear that this is just our personal take on these comments within the bounds of the scenarios we laid out within the video, Could Saiyans Survive Warhammer 40k? It doesn't have anything to do with the actual canon of things and will be specifically in reference to the things that we've already talked about in the last video, for the most part. If this video does particularly well, we might even consider waxing bullshit in a similar fashion for other Could They Survive 40k videos and maybe even continue one or all of the scenarios if people want. It's been a while since we wrote fanfiction, and that's basically what any legitimate sequel to Could They Survive 40k would actually be, but if the patrons want it, well, they're the ones who pay our bills, so, this is the way it's gonna be until we become president, right? we're here for you guys. As mentioned to the original poster when they mentioned Broly and other specific characters on their first comment, we just have those things on the list for their own potential videos down the line. That's why we didn't include Goku or Vegeta or anything like that in the original scenarios, because we want them to get the opportunity to have their own videos. If the dice gods smile upon them, they'll be inserted into a poll, and from there, if the patrons want them, they'll get voted for, and eventually those videos that we want for them will be theirs. We also didn't include Super Saiyan gods at the time, because at the time, we had precious little information on the phenomena, and at this time, a lot more has come out about them. That being said, we will consider Super Saiyan gods in this video rather extensively, so anyone who wanted this for the original video, here you go. You get your way. You get a whole entire full-length video that happens to have a major inclusion of Super Saiyan gods to cover for this scenario. Also, for the sake of mercy, we're going to be putting all of the commenters' original questions via their comments in annotations rather than screenshots to save them the embarrassment of having their typos and identity seen at the same time by hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people. As a professional writer, we know the torture and suffering of such a thing, and personally wouldn't wish the torture of having our typos seen by any but the greatest of our enemies. So let's go through these questions one at a time, starting with the question of psychic power and the presence in the warp. You're not going to like it, at the very least, but the warp and other psychic races aren't going to find themselves getting some big advantages against the Saiyans. Saiyans, as mentioned in this original comment, are compatible with magic. They can not only learn and use it, but they can also resist it with their chi, and they can have magic used upon them. The power of chi also rather specifically allows for abilities like telekinesis and telepathy, healing, and casting energy blasts at people. For example, Goku once gave part of his chi to Frieza to keep him alive, for some stupid reason. Meaning that the Saiyans will not be surprised by any psychic powers leveled against them in the 40k universe. All of that stuff's old hat. And if they're not going to take Korn up on his offer of infinite battles for infinite power, the Saiyans are so proud and so addicted to the smell of their own shit that there is a very little chance they'll care about the offers of the other Chaos Gods or any supernatural entities in the 40k universe. Hell, even if they do choose to take some power from an external being, it will inevitably be just to turn on their would-be masters. See Vegeta getting so high off of his own fucking farts that he cast off interplanetary mind control magic, which he willingly entered into by himself during the Buu Saga, just to gain enough power to beat up Goku. However, that is not to say that this edition doesn't change things in our scenario, and now that you brought it up, we really have to account for the true diversity of chi and how absolutely busted it can make even a standard human in the 40k setting. And for that we have to thank you, because it makes things really fun. You see, Saiyans have all of these cool psychic powers, but they're not rooted in the warp. Quite the contrary, if anything, their abilities, the capacity to utilize chi, are based in the power of the physical. Saiyans that are physically underdeveloped are less able to use chi and have less to go around. Opposite to how psychic power is used in the 40k universe, psychic powers with chi are not based on thought, but in body. And that capacity is not only granted to Saiyans, who have a natural affinity for chi, but also to humans. Humans can utilize chi, once instructed, to fly, shoot lasers, read your mind, all that stuff completely free of the influence of chaos and the warp. In fact, such dedication generally only makes the mind stronger and more resistant to things like magic and corruption, because after all, a strong mind and a strong body must work in unison to master chi. Yamcha, for example, once upon a time a simple bandit, got to the lofty power level of 2 billion after the Tournament of Power. Let's consider that Goku nearly destroyed the entire universe with a single punch against Beerus during one of their fights. The shockwaves from that punch went across the entirety of Universe 7 and nearly destroyed it. Goku's canon power level at the time was 14 trillion. That's roughly 7,000 times the power of Yamcha after he got swole in the Super Timeline. Accounting for roughly 2 trillion stars in our universe, though Dragon Ball's universe is explicitly much larger than our own, and considering that the shockwaves from Goku's punches would still have to travel through millions of light years of intergalactic space between any given galaxy, and thus would have lost energy quite quickly during the interim, we can assume that Goku's capacity to punch out the universe can scale down to Yamcha's level easily enough with a basic mathematical equation. If a power level of 14 trillion holds the potential to destroy 2 trillion galaxies with a single blow, then Yamcha's paltry power level of only 2 billion would only allow him to punch out roughly 285,714,285 galaxies and change if inserted by himself with no clothes on into the 40k universe. Which is explicitly the same universe as our own and thus follows all of the same size statistics, therefore we can assume that it has about 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. That's right! Yamcha! Dragon Ball's resident joke, existing only to get the fuck kicked out of him and have a meme made out of him lying in a crater made by his own body. The guy who had an episode entitled Yamcha's Big Break, where his crowning achievement in the entire series at that time was getting his legs snapped. That guy could annihilate the entire 40k galaxy with the snot that he flicked off a single finger after idly picking his nose. And this guy, by and large, is generally considered to be the weakest Earthling Z-fighter. Period. Full stop. What a bitch, right? But of course, we'll save Krillin for his own video if you ever want to see what real power looks like in the hands of a human. Long story short, the introduction of Chi and a hypothetical Saiyan race training humans to utilize it would open doors the likes of which would make the power granted by Chaos unnoticeable by comparison. Chaos worship would quickly become obsolete when you can just start working out all the fucking time and get super swole to shoot lasers and read people's minds. In fact, this could be a carrot for the Saiyans to wave in front of the human race. Already, the 40k universe is perfectly willing to train and fight day and night. But now, with proper direction and instruction, Saiyans could give perfectly normal humans the capacity to fry Custodes where they stand, to bounce bullets off their fingers, and to fly several times the speed of sound, or even light. And the Imperium would not be able to compete with that sort of marketing. Come to a Saiyan world, train and fight, get strong and learn to shoot lasers, fly, and use telekinesis. Live life to the fullest and get yourself a hot Saiyan wife. You don't have to be powerless anymore, ever again. And of course, with levels of power this insane in plain reach of humanity and Saiyan kind alike, they would have physical potency that could completely fry a blank, if they even applied, which we don't think they would, considering that chi is not the power of the soul, but the power of life itself. Blanks may not allegedly have souls, but they are alive. So, before long, the idea of utilizing chaos to gain power would just stop being a thing throughout the entirety of the galaxy. Sure, working out is hard and it's a bit of a risk, but nothing more than anything else you'd experience in the 40k universe. Instead, you'd have a veritable arms race of species trying to figure out how to use chi and how to use it against each other, with Saiyans overwhelmingly holding the advantage thanks to their natural aptitude, personal biology, history, and capacity to gain far more from mortal wounds and near-death experiences. And because Saiyans would easily be able to renew their species with a combination of crossbreeding with humans and the good old-fashioned method that made them start yeeting off their children in the first place, it's fair to assume that they would be able to quickly produce a reputation as star-traveling battle gods before a few centuries went by. Why pray to the Emperor and hope for his light when you can pray to the Saiyans and have them personally train you to fight for yourself? And blow up planets! But what about Saiyan gear, you ask? Well, it would largely look the same, we imagine. Since Saiyan armor is designed to take blasts from Saiyans at war, it's reasonable to assume that their gear would be better than much of what the 40k universe would have to offer. Vegeta's Saiyan armor, in some arcs, is shown to take punches that rate in the gigatons, and we aren't seeing many personnel weapons in 40k that can manage that sort of punishment. That being said, much of classic Saiyan war gear wouldn't change. This, of course, also takes things like bolters and other standard range weapons out of the equation, because it's fair to assume that they would be too slow and ineffective compared to a Saiyan just flying over and punching you in the face or something. They might be reserved for children, though, since Goku at 13 was shown taking a rocket to the face and smiling at it. At 12, he was shot in the face by a pistol and treated it like a bee sting. As an infant, he was sent off to conquer a fucking planet because... what? Oh, one moment, let us... We got it somewhere around here. Right. One moment, we'll check our notes. Oh, right. Because he was weak. He was sent off by himself to conquer an entire planet as an infant because Goku was weak. If the Saiyan race could find a personal weapon in the 40k universe that could do damage to them, they might consider adapting it to their lowest warrior classes as a means of incentivizing the upper classes to train and improve that much harder and outgrow the strongest of the weapons they found in the galaxy. We don't, for example, know what the fuck Paragus was using, but such a feat has never been replicated. For all we know, his blaster weapon was a stasis chamber holding a Kamehameha wave from future Goku from 100 years after the setting's beginning. There's just no way to say. That being said, let's focus more on the melee options because we think there's something here worth talking about. The power pole, canonically, is, quote, an indestructible magic pole that extends and contracts on demand, unquote. Because it is explicitly indestructible, Goku, or anyone, can swing it as fast as they like. This will always multiply the force total of a swing, regardless of who is using it, and so is always an effective option in combat, regardless of how powerful the Saiyan using it might be. Power weapons, so we gather, are fairly similar in that they basically cut through just about anything they touch. Assuming they don't break when they hit something too hard, and indeed cut through just about anything they touch, the same rule would apply for them. Presumably, Saiyans might really like power weapons, as they provide a degree of sharpness other weapons cannot, so long as they don't break when you swing them too hard. And, of course, it's entirely likely that Saiyan scientists develop some sort of power weapon analog down the line that one channels chi through after seeing Psychers do the same with their own Imperial weapons. That being said, even monomolecular blades and weapons that target the fucking soul won't really work against adult Saiyans like they work against everyone else. Saiyans are used to attacks that cut through atoms and the like, so monomolecular blades of the Eldar or the Necrons simply don't pack the punch that they do with everyone else. And Saiyans have shown themselves in canon to be able to defend against magic abilities that specifically target the soul. In fact, they've even shown disembodied Saiyan souls fighting living people and killing them using chi attacks. So the 40k universe, even the strongest powers in it, really don't have many options against these ape folk. Well, you know what they say, if you can't beat them, join them. So let's talk about cross-species compatibility. At least with raw humans, we know that Saiyans produce offspring that are themselves interfertile with both humans and Saiyans. Earth, in the Dragon Ball universe, not really our Earth, but they call it Earth, so we're gonna call it Earth, has 3 different types of Earthlings, as they call them. Animal-type Earthlings comprise about 17% of Earth's population, and the Earth itself is ruled by an anthropomorphic dog named King Furry. Monster-type Earthlings take up about 7% of all Earthlings, and a perfect example of this variety includes the goblin-like Emperor Pilaf from the original Dragon Ball series. Human-type Earthlings take up the rest, with exception to around 1% of Earthling hybrids between human-type Earthlings, monsters, Saiyans, and animal types. You may also become an animal-type Earthling, regardless of what Earthling you start as, with a special drug that has mostly become completely illegal throughout the entirety of the Dragon Ball universe. All 4 of these categories have been shown to interbreed with each other, and their offspring are all interfertile with all of the other types. Tien is a hybrid between a monster type and a human type Earthling. The Sun and Brief's families are entirely human Saiyan hybrids after the first interbreeding event in the Dragon Ball Z timeline. There's a long list of various hybrids, and all are canonically considered interfertile with each other, even after hybridization, no matter how mishmashy and extreme that hybridization seems to become. That being said, we're going to be taking the most generous interpretations when considering abhumans. You see, generally speaking, interbreeding with abhumans is not really a good thing. Sure, it's known about, at least with those abhumans that are actually fertile. Some are sterile and vat-grown, for example, but standard humans are not really supposed to see abhumans as sexy or available for that sort of attention. However, there is precedent. Caiaphas Kane's own assistant, Gunnar Jürgen, one of the few good books we've really read our way through, was allegedly hit on by a drunk Ogren girl once, and she was very drunk, apparently, and a Ratling sniper in another book, whose name escapes us right now, has a full human boyfriend/husband in the guard, or something like that, so it's clearly not outright illegal, even if it's frowned upon. We imagine it really depends on the planet you happen to be on, but suffice to say, generally speaking, the Imperium doesn't like abhumans getting it on with normal humans, but it's not strictly illegal in most places that we found. Just frowned upon. We think it's entirely reasonable to assume that, having none of the cultural stigma behind reproducing with abhumans, and indeed considering that Saiyans interbreeding with aliens is fairly common in the Dragon Ball universe, we'd start having abhuman Saiyan hybrids quite quickly, like within the first few decades. Once again, Saiyans are wont to breed so quickly that they not only got the urge, but indulged in the inclination to fling their infants off-planet just to force them to get a job. A Psyker Saiyan, in the meantime, would look like a Saiyan by any other name. If anything, they might be the strongest physical Saiyans around, as the constant hypothetical temptation for power from chaos will be drowned out, internally and culturally, by the need to improve oneself to attain power that the Chaos Gods simply can't provide. Power natural to the Saiyans that eclipses most of the rest of the galaxy. Chi provides all the powers that the warp possibly can, with none of the downsides. So that connection might just act as a catalyst to encourage any Saiyan psychers to train harder, to fight that which swims through their mind. Not with some meditative power, but with their physical fists and the force of life itself. It would be something that would try to tempt them constantly, whilst instead being an undying and constant reminder that they can do so much better than what is being offered. If Zinch, for example, came to Goku and said that he could make Goku super powerful, Goku would just put it together that this means that Zinch must be really strong, and then Goku would punch that Chaos God in the face and blow him to Kingdom fucking Come, because Goku can casually destroy a universe on accident. This is doing that, but with an entire species of planet-destroying idiots that fling their babies off to other random planets because Junior's gonna be just fine, sweetie. He's weaned, he's a big boy, he can take care of himself now. As for the question of implanting gene seed into Saiyans, considering that most humans reject gene seed and the process kills them, Saiyans would almost certainly reject gene seed as well. We don't, for example, know of any abhumans with gene seed. That being said, it doesn't really matter because by the time a Saiyan child is old enough to hit puberty, they are already so hilariously durable that several kiloton explosions cannot pierce their skin. Goku, canonically, did not really start growing tall until his first major growth spurt at 15, and he's considered a fairly average example of the Saiyan race for growth progress. Gohan and Trunks had a similar progression for their aging, so this checks out. And, of course, Saiyan anatomy is evolved for 10 Gs of gravity. The structure of their musculature alone might actually crush some of the gene seed organs before they get the opportunity to implant properly, especially when we remember that no bullet has ever shown itself to be able to pierce Saiyan skin under any circumstances in the entirety of the extended canon. At most, they cause base discomfort. More often, they are simply not noticed. Implanting gene seed into a Saiyan, if it took, would actually make them weaker, as their implants wouldn't be able to keep up with the rest of Saiyan anatomy and the standard amount of improvement that Saiyans make just growing up. It's far more realistic to train infant Saiyans on fully fledged veteran Space Marines so that they can get the combat experience early on someone who they won't outright eviscerate on accident. We could actually use Space Marines as nannies to raise Saiyans so that they could finally settle the fuck down afterward and have families and good lives whilst their adopted Saiyan children went out and took care of things more easily. That's what Grandpa Gohan did. For that matter, the advent of Chi and the Saiyan Empire expanding to teach humans how to use Chi for their own would make the idea of Space Marines completely obsolete. They would literally just be the first generation of trainers for the new Saiyan generation. Humans would be flying and punching mountains apart and shooting lasers from their eyes and shit. Gene seed just wouldn't matter anymore. But let's travel on to the next subject. Let's talk about Super Saiyans. Now, there's a reason that in the original video, we only invoked Super Saiyans in reference to Korn and the Chaos Apes. The reason for that is because becoming a Super Saiyan, while anyone can actually do it so long as they have at least a quarter Saiyan blood in their veins, is so punishingly rare that everyone thought that it was a myth by the time Vegeta came along. There's a reason nobody took Vegeta seriously about attaining the power of a Super Saiyan until Goku became one. It was just considered so ridiculous that nobody thought it could even be done. We had billions of Saiyans existing through the course of hundreds of years before the series ever even began, and all the same, not a single Super Saiyan among them, even as they're chucking their babies off to other planets to take them over. At least not in Universe 7, which we're assuming to be the origin point of this scenario's Saiyans upon the destruction of their world by Frieza at the end of the Bardock Saga. So, while becoming a Super Saiyan is totally achievable by any Saiyan in the scenario, the circumstances for becoming one are rather specific, and only Korn seems like he would be able to open up the avenue for all of them. Granted, the 40k universe is so hilariously violent that we wouldn't put it past a few errant Saiyans to eventually unlock the power of rage, mourning, loss, and wrath, brought upon by the horrors of the grim dark future. That being said, just Super Saiyan 1. The sort of power levels we're dealing with when considering higher levels are ultimately brought on by comparable challenges. And, as established both above and in the original video, Saiyans are so hilariously powerful that they can take over advanced space-age planets as infants. And indeed, Goku was sent off to be one such infant world conqueror. To say nothing of their vastly superior technological advantages over many factions in the 40k setting, much as we don't tend to focus on that shit in a setting that revolves around beating the fuck out of each other with fists and hand lasers. Also, 40k isn't exactly a setting that breeds pure-hearted individuals who rise above their limits to surpass evil. So, yeah, just Super Saiyans eventually, no big Super Saiyan gods or anything like that. But all the same, that's nothing to scoff at. Becoming a Super Saiyan isn't really a thing like you might think about. It's not a solid, specific, static power increase. It's a modifier that imparts a special power multiplier that is both possible in the universe of Dragon Ball through other methods, see Kaioken, and doesn't imply anything about the user's initial power. After fighting against Beerus, base Goku's power level matched up to what he was as a Super Saiyan God at roughly 300 billion, meaning that any time he entered even first level Super Saiyan after that, he was multiplying his new base power level by the Super Saiyan modifier, rather than any previous power level he may have had at his baseline. So, post-Battle of the Gods Goku, at base level, had a power level of 300 billion, and going Super Saiyan would have multiplied that by something along the lines of 10 times. So realistically speaking, you can still have a Saiyan with a power level of 300 billion, and them not be able to go Super Saiyan, if that makes sense. Just, don't think about it too terribly much, and just believe us when we say that being a Super Saiyan by itself is not actually very special. It doesn't really matter. As far as we can tell, the only real difference in it all is God Ki, and we'll talk about that exceedingly sparsely. Moving on. Let's address that elephant in the room. The Super Saiyan God itself. There was a good reason that we inevitably decided not to use it in the original scenario, but we're gonna humor the idea here in this response because it will really establish just how powerful the Dragon Ball setting actually is, especially compared to and in reference to the 40k setting. Let's assume that the Super Saiyan God we have in question has a power level of 300 billion, just like Goku during his first fight with Beerus immediately after the Super Saiyan God summoning ritual. Obviously, yes, the Chaos Gods, the Eldar, tons of Psychers would feel it. Yeah, definitely a bunch of specific, small, interested parties would feel it and would know that the game has completely changed and the internal meta of the 40k universe has been made completely different. We imagine the Chaos Gods would react in the ways they normally do. Slanesh would try to seduce such a power. Zinch would futilely try to plan against it. Nurgle would try to make it sick. Korn would throw down. All would fail. The Chaos Gods can't even take over their own galaxy, let alone punch out millions of galaxies with a single blow. Such an entity, especially considering that they keep such power when returning to base form, considering that every Saiyan that we have seen become a Super Saiyan God has kept that power when returning to base form, such an entity would dominate the entirety of the 40k galaxy with casual ease and skill. It would be effortless. Because of shit we've actually seen in the canon of Dragon Ball Z, specifically during the Buu Saga, we wouldn't put it past such an entity to actually pull the Eye of Terror closed with their bare hands. Beerus and Goku, during their first fight, were trading blows at post-relativistic speeds. Some fool on Korra clocked his standard base speed after achieving God status as something along the lines of 80 trillion miles per hour. That's almost 120,000 times the speed of light at base speed, with no Super Saiyan nonsense. At such a velocity as that, Goku could have freely strolled across the entire Milky Way in less than a year. And that was before he actually trained up in that form. And, of course, we don't even have to consider instant transmission or anything like that in this hypothetical. We don't need to. The Super Saiyan God already beats the fastest forms of transit in the entire 40k universe without needing to consider just, disappearing in one spot and appearing in another spot. Such an entity just breaks the rules of the 40k setting as a whole. The Eldari would instantly know of its presence and revere such an entity as a savior of the universe. The Chaos Gods would break themselves on his fists. The other Sakers in the universe would regard him as a god that had more power than they could ever imagine, and yet no connection to the warp at all. A true Super Saiyan God in this scenario, which you should recall does not include Goku, would rather easily take over the entirety of the 40k universe and rewrite the whole setting to revolve around them. The rest of the universe would know very little until he arrived at their doorstep. If you don't have psychic powers, if you're not a god, if you're not some Eldar, whatever, you're just chilling at home. And then the Super Saiyan God shows up. And once he does, you bow down and let him take over. Because he can breathe the entire galaxy out of existence. Because those lasers coming from their mouths that Saiyans can do that we showed in the last video. In the event of ancient Saiyans, or evil Saiyans, from which all modern Saiyans are descended, it's legitimately just the same, but even worse. The ancient Saiyans not only had all of the same foundational abilities as modern Saiyans, but a completely different and overwhelmingly more powerful chi potential. They had the bloodline of the Saiyan God flowing through their veins, and the capacity for their self-improvement was more than it ever was before or since. That being said, without the presence of evil Saiyans, if we assume that the Super Saiyan of God in this hypothetical was just made from some standard universe Saiyans transported in the wake of Frieza destroying their planet, we have a bunch of horrifying little Saiyan godlets running around shortly thereafter, since it's established that the Super Saiyan God blood canonically passes down through the bloodline and was entirely destroyed by the evil Saiyans in the distant past of the Dragon Ball universe. So we know that this Super Saiyan God, the moment that he got busy with anybody, would just start pumping out more Super Saiyan Gods. As to whether or not Korn and Cumber would go toe-to-toe, what would happen, etc., we leave that to the imagination of our viewers. That being said, we want to point out that Cumber's highest base cannon power level in his base form is 75 septillion, and that goes up to 86 septillion when in Super Saiyan 3. When we remember that Goku and Beerus nearly destroyed the entirety of their universe on accident when Goku only had a 14 trillion power level, we'll just let you consider what power that many orders of magnitude higher would do to an entity like Korn. Cumber can just annihilate entire universes with a wave of his hand, so let's not pretend anything or anyone in the 40k universe can stop him. This is a perfectly reasonable time to include Turles in, by the way. Turles, whatever, we don't give a shit. Even at his weakest, Turles has a power of nearly 1 million, meaning that he would absolutely solo anything that got in his way in the 40k universe, potentially even punching out large portions of the galaxy without thinking too terribly much about it. That being said, eventually Turles' power ends up growing to the septillions, once again. Similar to Cumber, there's really nothing that can handle that sort of power, and we'll explain why when we answer the next question. Finally, oh boy, this is a silly, silly question. We're gonna go, for a long-ass time. Let's talk about the Super Saiyan God Key and ask if it would make said God immune to chaos corruption. In general, when considering metafictional analysis like this, we tend to follow some pretty decent rules. All the powers work in whatever setting we put whoever in, check. You're at least as durable as you are strong or you blow yourself apart. Easy peasy. If you can move faster than the speed of light, you can dodge faster than the speed of light, etc. You get it. Basic, really simple, intuitive shit. Part of mind control powers and corruption falls into the same general rules. If a Super Saiyan God, for example, were just as powerful as the Chaos Gods, raw power, we'd be inclined to say that Tzeentch could hypothetically swindle them. Or maybe Korn could fill them with enough rage to lose control. Maybe Slaanesh could seduce one to such a degree that she could consume part of their power. Maybe Nurgle could give them a bad case of the sniffles and actually do something. Or maybe they just fight to a standstill and extract a heavy toll on each other like the Emperor did in the Horus Heresy. And no matter what, the Saiyan would eventually recover and get that much stronger for their death-defying efforts, while the Chaos Gods would be actively diminished by the fight even after they took energy from the Saiyan God in question. That's not necessarily how the Chaos Gods work, that's how Saiyans work. And this would be reasonable to consume if this hypothetical Super Saiyan were indeed only comparable to the Chaos Gods, the Emperor, Gork, and Mork, and didn't have some kind of special sauce rolling around. But he's not. Once again, the Super Saiyan God can accidentally destroy the entire universe. Almost did. The Chaos Gods can't even get out of a single galaxy in a universe 2 trillion galaxies strong. The Super Saiyan God could actually punch out that entire galaxy and make the whole question fairly academic. Even Goku, before the Super Saiyan God ritual powered him up, would have been able to single-handedly annihilate any Chaos God that got in his way. After all, before the arrival of Beerus, Goku only had a power of 70 million. That's still enough to destroy 10 million galaxies with a single punch. This is Goku before Beerus arrived and he became a Super Saiyan God. If we assume, fallaciously, that each Chaos God has the capacity to destroy a single galaxy, that makes this hypothetical Super Saiyan God figure strong enough to destroy them 70 million times over in a single blow. Before going God. We also know from the canon that having a high enough power level without masking or holding it in can actually kill people. Just the spiritual pressure of someone's ki visibly causes wind, produces light capable of blinding people, throws people back onto their asses, and has even been seen a few times in the manga to physically crush people. Just standing in this entity's presence alone might just kill entities like Tzeentch or Nurgle, while the more physical powerhouses like Slaanesh and Korn would be lucky if they could throw the first blow before being entirely vaporized by the Super Saiyan God's breath. Remember, lasers from their mouth. But more than that, if we can assume that godliness has a sort of quality of its own over other things, and by GURPS standard, cosmic power directly counters cosmic power, then yeah, even a comparable Super Saiyan God would be immune to corruption on the same principle that Slaanesh is immune to corruption of Korn, and Tzeentch is immune to the corruption of Nurgle, etc. When you're a god, you just don't get affected by the mortal temptations and spiritual ailments of other gods. That's just sort of a thing. We can accept that. And since it's already been established that divine ki and divine chi is what makes the Super Saiyan God, and it is a special, extra potent thing over normal chi, we'd be inclined just to give that to them and assume it as a standard for the rest of this everything. To beat this dead horse just a bit more, this isn't just Super Saiyan God problems. This is all Saiyans. We've introduced into the 40k universe a species of hyper-powerful, bulletproof super soldiers who can scream planets into oblivion and fight literally anywhere with technology tailor-made for that purpose. The original question asked if the Eldar would be limited by the damage done to them by Slaanesh, but all of that really ignores the fact that the Eldar have been limited by the setting they're in. The strongest Eldar Farseers couldn't precognition their way out of a Saiyan flying in at 4 times the speed of light, punching a hole in their sun, and then absolutely destroying everything on the way out just with their shockwave. And of course, any resistance breeds adversity when facing the Saiyans. If you do find a way to kill a Saiyan, you better be sure that it worked, because you'll only get one chance to kill them before they come back 10 times stronger than they ever were before. No Warhammer Wayne, Exterminatus will not do the job. This was explained in the original video. The only way Exterminatus works is if you catch them as they arrive before they know where to go to find oxygen. Nothing better will do. You're stuck with them. The 40k setting on the whole is just completely unprepared for the job of even one or two very powerful Saiyans entering their setting, let alone the Saiyan race as defined in the original video, and certainly not the Super Saiyan God. And could the Necrons create something to stop Blut's waves and force Saiyans into their humanoid forms? Yes! Probably. Humans were able to do it pretty easily in Dragon Ball, so yeah, sure. Would it make a difference? No. The Necrons would still all die and their planets would be completely fucking vaporized with the wave of a Saiyan hand. Give the Saiyans a single century, and they'll already have spread across huge portions of the galaxy with an iron fist. There is nothing anyone can do to stop them if they are not annihilated the literal minute they arrive in the setting before they figure out what the fuck is going on. And with that, we believe we've done all the comments from this one person, or at least the ones that deem replying to. We really liked writing and recording this episode, and we want to thank everyone for watching it. Borghammer is still on. It's just the most research and labor-intensive project on the channel, so if you want us to be faster on the YouTube, you'll have to pledge to Patreon, as you saw in the episode the other day. That being said, we're super thankful for what we do have, and thank you all for watching and lasting for the entire video. Thanks a bunch for coming, everybody. Hope you enjoyed what you saw here today. If you liked what you saw here today, remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, go on down to our Patreon via that Linktree link in the description. Pledge even just $1 a month to help support the cause. Join the mighty ranks of all the lovely people in the credit section at the end of every video, and get your name in the game, and all sorts of other places over on our game channel and other channels. So yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. Stay safe, stay inside, stay healthy, and remember, of course, to help each other. Vote progressive, vote Bull Moose.